first book took me about 8 years to write. My second book only took about 8 months. And that was while I was juggling having a full-time job and being a first-time new mom. So what did I learn between the first book, which took me almost a decade, and the second book that took me less than a year to have a completed draft of? I'm Elle Diaz. I'm a contemporary romance author, podcaster, and copy editor. Here are some of the things that I've learned. I'm going to get into what I think might help you as a writer if you're struggling with discipline and with finding the time to write and with output the way that I was. My first tip is for anyone who is a pantser like me. I hate outlining. I hate it. And I hate having a story in my head that's so clear, but then when I go to face a blank Word doc, it's like the lights are on, but no one's home. To begin with is I just tell the story to myself. And I will do this with a voice note. So I'll open the voice memos app and I'll just talk through what I want the story to be as if I were recapping a movie to a friend. And I write a summary version of that into a Word doc, so then I have kind of an extended outline that I'm working off of. But it's not organized like an outline. So then I'll go back and use something like Romancing the Beat, or, you might use Save the Cat or something like that. And then I'll just sort what I already have into those different story beats. This is also what I do for revision. I'll talk through in my voice memos app anything that I'm having a problem with, that I'm trying to brainstorm. I'll talk it through with myself and I'll figure out how I want to approach an edit and then do a revised outline for my second draft and any subsequent draft. And a book that I recommend is Refuse to Be Done. And it suggests that your first draft be more of you discovering the story for yourself and being along for the ride, and then how in later drafts you take what was good from that first discovery draft, take those raw materials, and craft it into what will be your final story. My second big tip is from Write for Life by Julia Cameron, who also wrote The Artist's Way. She talked about the concept of grabbing time. So it's hard for me to find an uninterrupted hour or two to just focus on my writing, and I think that that's the case for a lot of people. So just squeeze it in where you can, even if it's just a few minutes. If you're waiting in line, you can fire up the notes app. If you're driving and can do so in a safe way, you can record something to grab the transcripts later once you're at home. You can find the time to doom scroll. You can find a few minutes to write like 100 to 200 words. Coat of paint on the wall drying, baby napping, anytime that you've got a transition between tasks, like between meetings, you can write a little bit, and even 50 to 100 words here and there makes a big difference, especially if you're trying to make a dent in some kind of word count challenge. A book that I would recommend is 1,000 Words, which is a book of essays from different writers about trying to write 1,000 words a day, and it has a lot of practical advice for achieving that word count and just for how to approach life as a writer in general. You've tiptoed into your story a few times throughout the day. It makes it easier when you do find that bigger chunk of time to sit down and really focus on your writing, to dive in, because you've already been thinking about it and you've already gotten a head start, so you waste less time that way. Another thing that has really helped me is to change the scenery and the devices that I write on. So I work from home, I spend a lot of time here already, so I have to change things up and go write at a bookstore, write at a coffee shop, write at a friend's house. I did that one day where I was like, hey, can I come over and just like talk to you about my story and where I'm stuck on it? And I have a few devices that I write on. I have a laptop, and it's a gaming laptop, so it's a beast. So if I'm lugging that thing somewhere, I already feel like it has to be worth bringing. So I have to get some writing done. I have a FreeWrite Smart typewriter. I love this thing. I got it as a push present. It eliminates distractions. I like the e-ink screen. You can toggle the backlight on and off, and it's really good for just writing without distractions. You can email it to yourself. It syncs to the cloud. I also write a lot on my iPad by hand. I use the app MyScript Nebo, which has really good handwriting recognition. I wrote a lot of my first book by hand using that app, and it was very helpful because it was something that I could just like sit on the couch with my iPad while being distracted by other things like watching TV, and just something would come to mind and I would grab my iPad and I would write a few words. And I do feel that words just flow differently when you're writing by hand. It's easier to make that emotional connection because it feels kind of like you're journaling. I also get a lot of ideas in the shower, so I think my next experiment is going to be getting one of those shower notebooks or one of those waterproof notebooks that hikers get, and just like put a suction cup on the back of it and put it up in my shower so that I can write then, instead of rushing out of the shower and being like, I had this great idea, I figured out what's wrong with my book, I gotta write it down right now. Another thing that really made a huge difference, and I don't know why I didn't try this before, I don't know why it's so helpful, but sprinting is so helpful. Just the idea of writing as fast as you can for 15 minutes. I've astonished myself with the kind of word counts that I've achieved that way. If you're competitive like I am, sprinting with a friend is really helpful because you can compare word counts at the end. And I just, sprinting kind of pisses me off, because why is it that I was able to write 1,000 words just now when it's been like pulling teeth to get that word count in like an hour and a half writing session before? One of the things that has helped me with sprinting that I don't use that often, but when I have, I've had really good experiences with it, is a program called For the Words. I like playing cozy games, so it sets you up with different monsters you can battle, and the monsters are really adorable, and you basically choose a monster, and the way that you defeat it is by battling it and achieving your word count for the sprint that you're doing. And it's just really satisfying, and I've written some substantial chunks of my writing using that app when I'm really having trouble getting into the flow of things. And also my undiagnosed ADHD and my constant need for dopamine just makes it so that anytime that I can gamify a task on my to-do list, it's good to go ahead and do that. Another thing that helped me was getting better at writing out of order. So I write the way that I read. I'm a mood reader and I'm a mood writer. I just kind of go where the vibe takes me. And that's not great sometimes, because I ended up with my first book having to do a lot of work in the revision stage because of missing connective tissue between a lot of like scattered scenes that I wrote. So what I do now is, if I'm going to write out of order, I still try to leave placeholder chapters where I label what's going to happen in the scene so that the story stays linear, even if I'm jumping around. And I will try to not get bogged down in hyper-specific details, which is something that happened to me all the time with the first book. So I would get to a secondary character, and suddenly I needed a name for this character, and I hadn't thought of a name, so I had to like really sit there and ponder. Or there was a lot of like going down Pennsylvania custody law rabbit holes for my first book. And that took a lot of time. So I now, if there's something that is going to send me on a research rabbit hole or something that I don't feel like writing right now, but it has to happen in the middle of a specific scene that I'm working on, I'll just put something in brackets like fill in details later. I'll highlight it depending on the program that I'm working on. Can't highlight on the free write, for example. I've also started using the label TK so that you can find any instance of TK and come back to, oh, that's a detail that I needed to fill in. And that just helps me to not get bogged down and interrupt my writing flow. The next thing that helped me to be more disciplined and write faster was to just not write alone. And I mean that both literally and metaphorically. Interacting with other writers made such a huge difference to me. It was reassuring to have conversations with writers who I admired and see that they had the same creative struggles, the same struggles with finding the time, with productivity, with motivation, and the same craft challenges. So I've learned so much from being in community with other writers. And it's just validating to see creative people who have been successful acknowledge their challenges. So even following writers online who talk about nitty-gritty craft stuff. One of the things that really changed the way that I saw myself as a writer was the book Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, because I'm a huge fan of the game Stardew Valley. I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. And I was so interested in Concerned Ape, Eric Barone, who's the creator, the developer of Stardew Valley. He developed that whole game by himself. And it's beloved. It's so intricate and detailed. And I'm just amazed that he could do all of that. All the art, all of the coding, all of the writing, all of the music. But I learned from that book and from other videos I've seen, he was not like this productivity machine all the time. Like, he had chunks of time where he would slack off all day, and then his partner would be coming home from work soon, and he'd switch back to working on Stardew Valley and kind of act like he'd been doing it all day because he hadn't. And to know that someone who I admire so much can also be a big procrastinator was very reassuring. Like, that's just like me for real. He was still able to accomplish this feat in the end, and I was still able to write the first book, even though there's a lot of procrastinating. So, you know, just getting outside of yourself and seeing other people's creative experiences is very helpful. Now, when I say literally write with other people, I mean it a few ways. Body doubling is infuriatingly helpful. So even if you don't have writer friends, if you have friends who are willing to work on whatever task they have, like even if it's answering emails next to you, it really helps. There's something about seeing someone else being productive that makes you want to be productive and to feel like, okay, well, I'm not in this alone. And if you can't get a friend or two together and you feel like writing, then there are lots of body doubling videos on YouTube. Anything that's like a study with me YouTube video is really helpful for writing. There's some trial and error going on with my setup right now. So if angles or zoom levels change, I'm sorry. I'm figuring it out as I go. I also suggest doing what I did and making being a writer your whole personality, because I would talk to anyone who would listen about how I was writing a book. And the more I talked about it, the more people would ask me, hey, how's the book going? When does it come out? When can I pre-order it? And being able to have something positive to report, to say that you are making progress on it, is really motivational. So just embodying being a writer helped me to write more. Go figure. And then my final tip for what helped me to write better and faster and with more discipline is I let my life serve my writing. Writing isn't just putting words on the page. It is binge watching well-written TV shows. It's reading books in your genre. It's reading books outside of your genre. It's exploring new places and having fun with your friends. All of these things are part of your writing. There's this scene. Okay, so my writing is very influenced by my life, and not just in the major milestones or the big emotional moments. I have a scene in my second book, In On the Action, that takes place at a silent disco. And one of the main characters, Ivy, is at the silent disco with her friends, and she's dancing to a Chapel Roan song, and she's realizing what a catch she is, and that she is right to be particular about who she ends up with as a partner. And it clarifies what it is that she wants and what she is holding out for. And that scene only came about because I went to a Taylor Swift themed silent disco with my friends and had the time of my life, and thought that it would be fun to send my characters to a silent disco. All the thematic stuff that happened in that scene that influenced later parts of the story, that was not where I was going with that scene in the beginning. So just because I had this fun experience that I wanted to write about, something about my story revealed itself to me. And the more experiences I enjoy in my real life that shape my writing, that I want to write about, the more things I think about that I want to process, the more creative I feel, the more I have fun when I'm writing. And making writing fun instead of it feeling like pulling teeth made a huge difference for me. If you're still here, thanks for watching. I hope that you got something valuable out of this, out of my hard-learned writing lessons. Let me know in the comments below what the best writing advice you've ever received was. And you can follow me at LDiaz Romance on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky to keep up with what I'm working on. See you next time.